feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What is going on, guys? We are chasing the pennant tonight. My name is Sean. I am your host for today, and I'm joined with Boric. Boric, how are you doing today, bud?
Doing well. It does look like it's going to rain soon, but, other than that, it was a nice day. Got out to exercise, got the dog out. So it's been nice and been doing a lot of podcasts recently, which I love doing, and I definitely love talking about guys that can just mash the hell out of the ball. So that's going to definitely be very fun in this pod.
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait. And if the weather doesn't match what Boric is saying, that's probably because we didn't record this on the day you're listening to it. This is actually an archived podcast. This is an idea we had just in case we were ever short on content. So we are recording this right now. We just got the news that baseball is technically back. We have a set date. It's July 24th. We're recording this at the end of June, and we're so excited about baseball that we just want to talk about it, talk about guys that can crush home runs, as Boric said. And we'll have a lot of excess content for you guys. So we have no idea when you're going to hear this. Some of these numbers may be wrong by the time you do hear this, but we hope you enjoy the content anyway. So as Boric said, we are going to be focusing on guys that can absolutely rake, and specifically guys that are still in today's game that could reach some of the milestone numbers of home runs. So this actually came from a tweet that we saw from MLB Stats on Twitter, and it asked, which of these 8 players do you think will end up hitting 500 home runs in their career? And those guys are a lot younger. They're guys that are still at the beginning of their career, still, hovering around some. I mean, there was 67. Ronald Acuna Jr. has 67 home runs, and they're considering him. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but we're going to go kind of in order of who's the closest to who is the farthest and still has a chance. With that being said, there are a couple guys that are still playing that you have to talk about when you talk about guys like this. It's Albert Pujols. And Boric, I'll throw this to you. How many do you think Pujols will end up with if he's already at 656 home runs?
That's going to depend how many years is back and he just wants to keep going, because, he still normally hits in the 20s. I know I talked about it on MLB Network, and I was surprised when they said this, but he still averages like 20-something and around 90-something RBIs, they said, since he's been on the Angels throughout his totality with the Angels. He's just not an average hitter anymore like he was with the Cardinals, of course. So if he wants to play 4 more years, he could get close to the 700. It just depends what Albert wants to do. And that's ultimately up to him. And this year is really going to hurt him because of the shortened season. But it could also benefit him in a sense, too, because he's not going to be playing as much this year. And then he'll be coming back next year. And then maybe his next season, his full next season next year will be one of his best seasons we've seen in a while because of this layoff in a shorter season.
Right, and that's a precursor with a lot of these guys, because some guys are somewhat close, but you have to remember, they're up there in age, and, they're going to lose almost an entire season this year, dropping almost 100 games, and the potential, of a strike coming in the next couple years, considering how pissed off the players are at the owners after all of this, friction between the amount of games they wanted to play this year. So a lot of these guys, it's in jeopardy. Some players, like the next guy we're going to talk about, Miguel Cabrera, there's a chance they might not actually get to that 500 mark because they're going to lose most of this year and potentially another year in their career. So Miggy is at, right now, 477. He's tied with Adrian Beltre, and he is number 30 on the list. And this is a fun one because, he's Miguel Cabrera. You know how good he is. He's already a Hall of Famer. He's a Triple Crown winner. And it's hard to tell whether or not, in my opinion, I think he's going to stick it out until he gets to 500. But, he's going to lose most of this season. He needs about, 23 more? Do you think he gets it?
Again, he's similar to Albert. He's had Yeah, especially more injuries in the last 3 years after he made all those All-Star runs from 10 through 16. So if he can stay healthy, he hit 12 last year. So you figure if he's able to just keep hitting around 12 to 15 for a couple more straight years, then he'll get there. So if he's able to do that for a couple more straight years, then he'll be fine. But that's just a bigger if with him. But I do remember he's a guy I was really excited to see coming into this full season, because when watching MLB Network in the season before the whole world went topsy-turvy in the offseason, they were talking about how much good shape Miggy's looks like. He's in the best shape he's been in years, since at least his 2016 season. So I don't know if that's the case now, obviously, since we had this long ass layoff and people could have been sitting on their couch eating corn chips and drinking beer all day. So
Right.
you don't know what everyone's been doing. So, but normally he was in the best of shape. So I was really looking forward to him in a full season potentially getting. He had 12 last year when he wasn't even fully healthy and feeling the best, getting the 15 to 17, 18 homers, and then you would probably put him into that conversation easily again for getting it.
Right, and he hit 12 last year. He still batted 282 at the age of 36. So, I mean, he's got the potential. Like I said, I don't think Miggy retires unless he hits 500. I think he's got that set in his head. And, you know, at 37 years old, there's still some gas left in that tank. And I think he will try and put together the best possible career he can. I mean, he already knows he's a Hall of Famer. You know, 11-time All-Star, 7-time Silver Slugger, you know, Triple Crown winner. Like I said, there's nothing stopping him from getting in the Hall of Fame.
Should he be unanimous? I'm just curious. Do you think he should be a 4-time batting title winner, like all the other stuff you said? Triple Crown, he won a World Series. Do you think he should be a
2-time MVP, 4-time batting title? I mean, the Triple Crown, I think, alone gets him into the Hall of Fame. That's one of the hardest things to do in baseball. And honestly, I don't know if he'll be unanimous. I think he should be. I think if he gets to 500, along with all his other accolades, you know, a career batting average of 315 is enough. Like,
yeah,
he gets 3,000 hits. He's a little under 200 hits away from 3,000. I think he gets in, you know, no question.
I agree. I'm just going to be interested to see if there's a couple guys that don't vote for him like they did with Jeter. But, you know, we'll see what happens.
Well, we don't have to talk about Jeter on this podcast. We all know how we feel about Derek Jeter. I feel, at least. Moving on from Miggy, though, dropping down to number 52 on the all-time home runs list is Edwin Encarnacion. He's 37. He had 34 home runs last year at the age of 36. And he right now sits at 414 career home runs. Do you think he gets to 500?
He's really tough because I remember last year, for the one thing I wrote articles on, I wrote a thing on him and then ended up arguing with the guy that does the editing for my sports vote, because he was talking about how he's depreciating. And I'm like, well, no, he's really not depreciating. His average hitting is just depreciating, but his homers are going up at this age. And then the guy eventually agreed with me. So that was nice, but that's not the point of the thing. The thing is, he's a guy that seems like some guys seem to get better at some aspects of their game as they age. They lose like one aspect, but then another aspect just like magnifies somehow, where for Encarnacion, it seems like his home run hitting he used to hit for a better average with his home run hitting, but his home run hitting is just still ridiculous as he's able to just get better and better. Because, I mean, the dude's finished top 15 in the MVP quite a few times in his career from that 2012, through a 16-year stretch. He finished there like about 3 or 4 times in the top 15. So you know he can mash. And he's going to be tough, though, because he was in Seattle. He was able to match there. If he can stay in New York, parks like that, and stay in smaller parks, he's going to be a lot better. Now he's with the White Sox. That park's a pretty good hitting park as well. Yeah, he might be able to get there if he can stay in parks like that. I think he has to play to his advantage, though.
Right, and I think as long as he stays in that DH role where, you know, you don't have to see him on the field, I think for the most part, I do believe he'll get there. And, I mean, just looking at his home run totals the last couple of years, it doesn't look like he's depreciating at all in that aspect of his game, like you said. So I truly do think he'll get there.
Because they haven't done shit in a while. Like, when's the last accolade thing you remember, other than Mark Burley's perfect game, I believe that was, not a no-hitter? Right. So, like, when's the last thing you remember from Chicago as, like, a historical thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've been in a rebuild for a while now, and maybe it'll come to fruition this year. But yeah, no, I think he can kind of lead into that new wave in Chicago. I think he can bring up some of these young guys with him, and I don't know. I like I said, I think he'll get there, and like you said, that's a small park, and not a small park, but a good hitters park.
It's a solid hitters park.
Yeah. And I mean, he's less than 100 away. He needs about 86 more to get to that 500 mark.
Yeah.
I think he gets there.
It's also a
I
very
wouldn't question
boring
it.
park.
Right.
Just to point that out. Not that that's important, but just when you watch that stadium on TV, there's like nothing. When people thought the MLB might think of using Chicago as a hub city, they were like, "Oh, sweet Jesus," because having Wrigley would be awesome, but having the White Sox stadium on TV a bunch of times would not be awesome.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah.
But, it would be serviceable. I would take it. I would take it for baseball in a hub city at any cost. But
That's true.
moving down 5 spots on the list to number 57 is Nelson Cruz. This is the list of current players still in the MLB that are on the all-time home runs list, by the way. Nelson Cruz sits at 57 with 401, so he needs 99 more to hit that elusive 500 mark. Last season, he was 39. He's hit 41 home runs for the Twins. Do you think he's, entering his age 40 season, a shortened season, do you think he gets to 500?
I think he's the guy the shortened season hurts the most because you're coming into your age 40 season. I understand he's been raking, but because of this year, he'll probably have to play to 43 at least, probably to get to the 500. He might be wanting to do it, and if he's wanting to do it, more power to him. But you also eventually would think Father Time might catch up, like we saw guys in other sports like Brady, where eventually it finally caught up. Where it hasn't caught up to Nelly yet, but in one of his age 40 years, it might eventually catch up. So he's the most interesting case because if he had a full season this year, I would say absolutely because he went from 30 to then hitting 40 again at the age of 39. So if he was able to hit 38 to 40 something again this year, then absolutely. I think this year just hurts a 39 going on 40-year-old absolutely the most because he's also 99 away, like you said, which is no slim pickings.
Right, I couldn't agree with everything you just said more. I think he definitely is hurt. I wrote a big maybe next to his name. I still don't know whether or not he'll get there. I think he's a guy that'll end up, right around where Beltre ended up, and that's around like the 470s. I think he gets as close as possible, but like you said, I think time catches up with him. He's been playing out of his mind the last couple seasons, and it seems like his power has just kept up all these years, and it's kind of crazy that it's almost like his power didn't start until he was already 29, 30 years old, and then he started to really pick it up in his mid-30s. And I don't see it lasting, but, maybe. I mean, he is a guy that seems determined, and the Twins do nothing but mash baseballs. I don't know what they put in the water over there, but the amount of home runs they've hit the last 2 seasons it's insane. So I could absolutely see him hitting that 500 mark. But I do think he comes a little short. It's tough to tell right now.
I agree.
Yeah. So this is the last in the top 100 of all-time home run hitters. This is the last current player, and this is one that even before the show when I brought up his name, we kind of got into a little discussion about it because it's another interesting case, and that's Ryan Braun. He sits at 344 home runs right now, which is 97th all-time. He is only 35, which seems crazy because it feels like he's been around forever. In 2019, he batted .285 with 22 home runs. Personally, I don't think he gets to 500 just because I feel like he's slowing down a little bit. I mean, he is still getting to 20 home runs and still hitting in the 280s, which is remarkable for a 35-year-old. But he's had a remarkable career. So what do you think, Bork?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Braun, I think we saw a shift in his game a little bit as he aged because you saw him from being that big homer to RBI guy where now he still has the RBIs, but the more because his batting average, like I know he hit 254 and 268 the 2 years prior, then he went all the way up to 285 this year. It seems like he's kind of fine-tuning with age what he knows he can still do the best, which for me, from seeing that the last 3 years, that's not necessarily mashing the homer anymore. That's kind of hitting 270, like if he can keep doing what he built on last year, hitting 270 and up and getting you the 70 some RBIs, but more because he has gap power and not as many home run power anymore. Now, with the current coaching staff, if for some odd reason, because we don't need him whatsoever, but I'm just making this for an argument's sake, we actually have good hitting coaches now, he could probably get to it in CBP because you're going to have a DH and you can just smoke it in the summer there, or if he goes to even Chicago for him, but they don't really need him. Like there's a couple stadiums I could name as a DH where I think if he gets there with the right hitting philosophy and he's the DH and they're teaching him to just kind of go more for the homer again, he might be able to get there. But that also depends if he wants to change his philosophy, because it seems to me just from watching him, I've always really liked Ryan Braun. The only blimp with him was the whole steroid thing that made me dislike him for a period of time. But from watching his whole career, it seems like he's kind of changed his philosophy a little bit to adapt to his age. So I don't think that's going to change.
Right. I agree. I mean, I don't see him leaving Milwaukee. I mean, I would believe it if I saw it happen, but if he were to go to a better ballpark, and I mean, we've seen how well he hits in CBP. I mean, he's destroyed the Phillies for years. If he goes to a ballpark like that, he absolutely has a chance. And I just keep coming back to the fact that he's only 35 years old. He's still hitting 285 with 20-something home runs. I mean, it's about the longevity. And if he does change his game in that sense to adapt to his, his body and, how it's changing, I think that he definitely has a chance. He's just got to sustain that success. I mean, you look at his accolades, he's the same way. You just look at some of the stuff. He was the 2011 MVP, and this is another thing I wanted to bring up to you. He's a 6-time All-Star Rookie of the Year. Subtract the steroids right now because we know how much bias that holds in MVP or in Hall of Fame voting. Sorry. Do you think he gets into the Hall of Fame? I mean, he's had a hell of a career up to this point, but it's definitely a question mark. I think if he continues this for a couple more years, he's got a hell of a chance.
I think he should. I mean, with almost a 50 career WAR and you have a 298 batting average to go with your ridiculous 533 slugging and 893 OPS. I mean, those are ridiculous career numbers when you put it with the 344, and he's definitely going to get, in my mind, at least a 400 homers. So if he plays at least till he's 40. So that's something that by the end of his career, having all those numbers put together, if he can keep hitting around the 280s, his average is still going to be really good. That average combined with that pop and that, like I said, his whole career, he had the great gap power and could hit it the whole field. It's not like he just adapted that now. It's just that's what he's mainly become now. He's a guy I think should highly get considered because he was very good for especially the whole beginning of his career stretch, then had like a couple off years in the middle and then really hit it again in like 14, 15, 16 when he made the All-Star game, was 23rd in the MVP in 16. So he's still a good player that just only really had one really down year in his career, which was 2018 when he only hit in the 250s. So if he only has that one really down year in his career where he only hit in the 250s, I would say that you should probably get into the Hall of Fame because I don't know what you're looking at. He's only had that one really down year because when he hit in the 260s back in 13, he had freaking 81 RBI. So I don't consider that a down year.
Right. And I mean, it's tough because he seems like a guy that'll be on the bubble for a couple of years. He seems like a guy that, is going to stick around, but he's not going to get as many votes as he wants because of the steroids. And we've seen how that has affected a lot of players, Bonds and Clemens and all them. And I mean, I think he's got to keep it up. He's got to put up more impressive numbers as the years go on to really consider himself a lock for the Hall of Fame. But we've spent enough time talking about a cheater, in my opinion.
I agree. The DH would probably help, though. We talked about that before the podcast. Having his legs under him for the whole season and not having to play the field anymore, even though he's still an adequate fielder and not subpar, that will probably help him in the long run as well.
Right, and I think the DH coming to the NL is going to give him a lot of options going into his free agency year.
I agree.
So 2 more guys that I wanted to talk about before we get into the actual tweet, because, the tweet sparked this debate topic, but I really wanted to talk about these guys that were a lot closer before we got into the real stars of today's game. So one of them is Robinson Cano, and he's at 324 home runs right now at age 36, and personally, he has slowed down a lot. I don't think he's going to get there. I mean, I don't exactly recall how often he played. He was on the Mets last year, I believe.
107 right? Games.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, that's not enough games. I mean, if he continues on that path, he's on the downward trend right now. I don't think he gets anywhere close. He's at 324 right now.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. He's a guy. The 2 years before now, he's still been hitting for average. That really dipped also last year. So we'll see if that remains the case with him. If he's able to keep hitting for average, he's probably a guy, since I know we brought it up before, that definitely has a good chance of potentially getting in the Hall of Fame. But in terms of hitting the home run mark, I don't know if he's going to hit that but he also can't have 4 straight years hitting 256 either. To have a good Hall of Fame ballot, that's not going to look good at the end of his career.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I just don't think he can sustain that success that he used to have. And I mean, he's already showed that he's on the downward trend. I can't see it. And then the last guy before we get to the tweet is Jay Bruce. And here's a really surprising candidate for a very surprising candidate for 500 home runs. Somebody he's at 312, which I think is way more than people even imagine him having right now. The fact that he's even in contention to get to 500. He's already over halfway there. He's at 312. And he's only 32, which is, I imagine, much younger than people would think he is because of how old he seems on a baseball field. Another guy that I think the DH majorly helps in this sense, if he stays with the Phillies, I think we use him as a DH heavily. And I think as long as he stays healthy, he has a huge chance of mashing baseballs for a couple years to come. What do you think?
Yeah, well, the other thing is if we keep the DH beyond this year and he does really well, even though the Phillies obviously have a logjam of hitters with Bohm and others coming up, you're not going to get rid of someone who's doing really well for you. So if you have the DH, you're probably going to give him another year. And then if he does well again next year, you might give him another year. And then, like I said with Bruce, the stadium plays, we saw that last year. He came here and started destroying the hell out of the ball as soon as he stepped into Citizens Bank Park. So, I mean, he just knows how to hit homers. He just knows how to drive guys in. He's a great guy to have on your team. He has a chance. Again, it's going to depend if he can stay with the Phillies or go to other stadiums that you can just mash the hell out of the ball and not like teams like Baltimore that suck that you can just mash that. Like I'm talking about like teams that actually have a chance to get stats. That's something that he definitely has a chance at this age because if he starts hitting the 25s, 30s again as a DH with his legs under him, that's going to start adding up over time at only the age of 32 or 33, whatever he's at right now.
Right, and I think he's a guy that injuries are a major concern. I think, he's a guy like, and I've said this before about Roman Quinn for the Phillies, how, he's great if you have him, but you have to anticipate that they're going to get injured. So when you have him, it's great. He's going to play up to the best of his ability. He's going to help the team a lot. But if he gets injured, you say, okay, you expect it. You grab somebody else and you put him right in his spot. And that's kind of been my philosophy for him and, like I said, Roman Quinn for the last really year or two for the Phillies. I mean, if they're there, it's great. If they're not, you move on. And, I mean, with the DH coming to the NL, and we talked about this on our most recent podcast, which could have been months ago whenever you're hearing this, the DH coming to the Phillies helps them a lot, and Jay Bruce is kind of the perfect guy for the DH for the Phillies.
I agree. And then the other guy that'll probably be used just to get him ABs early, especially against some lefties, is Bohm.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for that to happen. I can already see it. He's another guy that's going to hit 500 home runs. No question.
You're already calling him Michael Jack?
Pretty close. I think he's the next coming. I mean, why not? I mean, we're going to put him in first, but sure. So if all this talk of mashing home runs makes you hungry and you're in the Bucks County area, be sure to visit our guy Asian Rob over at Just Food. Get your catering needs for events or even just a takeout meal. Tell him we sent you here from CTP. That's 215-794-food or 215-794-3663. Treat yourself, take it home. We love him. He made our logo for our Twitter account, and he's a great guy. Go visit him. Get all of your catering needs. So moving on to the reason we have this debate topic, and that's the tweet, again, from MLB Stats on Twitter, asking who of today's stars is going to hit 500 home runs. And the first one we're going to talk about, we're going to go in order of most to least home runs from the tweet, is Giancarlo Stanton. Stanton has 308 home runs. He's 30 years old. I'm going to throw this right to you. What do you think, Bork?
Injuries. That's all I really have to say. I mean, I honestly think he would easily get to it, but injuries. The DH could thoroughly help him maybe, but hasn't helped him already. Like you said, this might be months ago when people listened to it, but Biscuit brought up in one of our podcasts, I'll phrase it that way, that Stan still gets injured as a DH. So, like, it's not like he's proven that actually helps him because he's mostly been DHing recently, and he still sadly gets injured all the time. I mean, I hate the Yankees with a passion, but I like Stanton. So I like to see guys like him stay healthy that have a chance to be some of the best home run hitters of our generation or hell all time. But for him, it's just the word I just need to use is injuries. That's why I don't think he's going to get to it.
I completely agree. I said the exact same thing to a couple of my friends. We were debating this for a while, and I said, I know he's only 30, but he is 30. I mean, that's over the hill in baseball years. And I mean, at 308, he's close. He's within 200, but I mean, I don't see him sustaining the success. He's been injured too many times in the last few years. You know, his contract already looks like one of the biggest busts in a long time. It's hard to see him staying healthy for long enough to hit 500 home runs.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that contract goes right with the contracts that I know Chris Russo was talking about recently, Mad Dog, about how you give people their second contract sometimes, and then you go, oh, that was the worst mistake of my life. Like about 3 years later, I'm pretty sure that's what's going on with Stan right now. It has nothing doing with him. It's just you can't. Injuries happen. I mean, we saw with Chase here in Philly. It was really sad. He could have had a way hell better end of his career if it didn't happen with him.
Right. And he's a guy. He just got bit by the injury bug, and it's been, carrying with him for such a long time. And it sucks. I do like Stanton. I'm better with him being in the Yankees than I am with him being on the Marlins when he was there. So now I can kind of root for him. He's a rootable guy. It just sucks that he's injured so much, and I truly don't think that. I think that holds him back from getting to 500.
That's true, but I don't know from the one thing you just said who's actually easier to root for, because the Marlins blow. We just suck against them. But I mean,
he was on the Marlins when they were.
They were decent, but I mean, we still should have been able to beat them some games because we would have dumbasses pitching against him. We'd be like, let's put in Antonio Bastardo against Giancarlo. It's just like, no. Like, we would just put in people that made no sense, or Jake Diekman or something, and you'd be like, I like you, Deke, but you shouldn't be pitching against Stan. Like, that was our problem playing. It's like we would play Florida and we just lost our minds. Like, it seems like every time the Phillies play Florida, like, their managers just turn into zombie minds, and it's just like, okay, let's put this guy in now. It's like, that guy's never pitched in his life. It's like, yeah, but we just called him up. It's like, yeah, so why are we putting him in? I have no idea. Like, oh, okay, great. Like, I mean, Stan's a guy, I think cheering for the Yankees for me is a lot harder than the Marlins, because the Marlins have only been good for, well, they won the World Series once, and then they've been good for only probably like 10% of my lifetime. So.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it sucked because I feel like, his 59 home run season with the Marlins, it feels like, 50 of them were against the Phillies, but
it also feels like that was 50 years ago.
That's very true, because it's been so long since I feel like I've seen Giancarlo Stanton hit a baseball for whatever reason. So the next guy on the list is a guy that we love to talk about as Philly guys. It's Mike Trout, and I feel like we don't have to talk about him for very long. He's at 285 right now at the age of 28. I feel like this can just be a unanimous yes and move on. What do you think?
Yeah, I think seven-time Silver Slugger explains it all. He's going to definitely get there. He might have 17 of them bad boys held by the time and not that many, but he'll probably have like 12 by the end of his career potentially. So he's a guy that's definitely going to get there.
Right, and the only thing that really scares me in that sense is, other than the strikes and the potential strikes and a shortened season, is the injury bug, which is another great power hitter that seems like he can never stay healthy.
Do we think that matters for Trout though? Because Trout seems to play less games and do better. He played 134 last year and hit the most home runs he hit in his entire career.
Right, but it feels like every injury he's gotten so far hasn't been major to the point where he can kind of come back, or he hasn't missed the most amount of time in his career. It's only I'm not going to say it like this, but I am. It's only a matter of time until he gets that one injury that starts to linger, or gets that one injury that holds him out for an entire season, and it scares you, because it seems like that's the type of guy that, if he had stayed healthy already his entire career, and if he stays healthy for the next 10 seasons, he's going to have the best numbers in the history of Major League Baseball. But, we might never know, because he is bit by that injury bug.
I agree. He's bit by it, but I think it's a little bit oversold how much, because the only season he's been majorly bit by it was when I went to look it up before Paul was 17, when he only played 114. Other than that, he's always played over 130 in his career, or over 134, because last year was 134. That was his second lowest. So he hasn't been, it's usually 20 to say the 25 game mark that he'll miss. It's not like he misses an abundance amount of games where you see certain guys like Stanton sometimes at this point, or Judge at times, only play 100 and then they miss 62. So he's not like that. That's why I think sometimes we have to point that out, so people, I think he's a little bbit overrated when it comes to the injury discussion, because he doesn't get injured as much as people think. But
I completely agree with that. It's just something you want to watch. You don't want to guarantee it. It's like some of the guys we're going to bring up, we can basically guarantee it, but it's something to worry about with him.
Oh, Trout, I would guarantee it. I mean, it's a risk. It's a risk, but I will still guarantee it, because he's Mike Trout. I mean, I think Mike Trout could probably play baseball on one damn leg and be like, yeah, you know what, boys, I'm hitting 15 homers this year. And it's like, okay. I think Mike Trout's honestly that good where he just doesn't even need to be, because he's played seasons already where he wasn't fully healthy and had those numbers. And that's the same with Judge, which is why Judge is obviously an interesting case that we'll get to. But Trout's a guy that I think I'll guarantee it, just because of how absolutely ridiculous he is.
Right. And I mean, we can jump around for a second here, and we can drop down to Judge, who currently sits at 110 home runs at the age of 28. Now, he came up very late in his career, so you have to take that into account, and the fact that he's injured a lot. I do think that he ends up in the 300 to 400 range. I think he definitely has a lot of time left to crush home runs and be Aaron Judge, as long as he can stay healthy, but I don't think he hits up to 500. What do you think?
No, I don't think he gets close to it, because he debuted, I believe it was the age of 26 he won the Rookie of the Year. So, I mean, that's pretty old to win your Rookie of the Year, 25, excuse me. So he won that when most people win that 21 to 24 at the oldest range. Right. And that's usually not even common for people to win it at. So he's a guy that got started later. And he also, the reason he has a lot of his home runs, which a lot of people don't realize, is because of that Rookie of the Year. He had 52. Then he's been good since, but he's had 2 straight 27 homer seasons. So if you consistently keep having 27 to 30 homer seasons, and you started your career that late, I don't see you getting to 500. You're going to have to get back to having those 50-some homer seasons.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's not like he's not capable of it, especially at Yankee Stadium, but it just seems a little, 500 seems a little far-fetched for a guy already entering his 28th season.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, again, jumping back to where we were, Nolan Arenado, this is an interesting name, because personally I don't think he gets there. He's already 29 years old, and he's at 227 career home runs. It's a guy that's been on the trade rumor mill, in the offseason. It's a guy that a lot of people thought was going to get moved. It seemed like at one point he was a surefire, bet to to be on a different team at the start of the 2020 season. And yet he's still in Colorado, and he signed that extension last season for, what was that, 8 years? Was his extension? 7 or 8?
Believe, 8 years, 260.
Right. So, I mean, he's a guy that I don't see him staying in Colorado the entire time. I think the trade talks continue. I think he ends up opting out at one of the peaks of his career to see if he can still get a lot more money. So personally, I don't think he gets to 500. I mean, he's not even halfway there, and he's already 29. What do you think?
He's also an interesting case because in his first couple years when he came up, he hit pretty well, but then his third year is when he really started mashing the homers, and he hasn't hit below 35 since. And obviously playing in Colorado is great, but I don't think he's going to stay there significantly longer, in my opinion. So depending where he goes, I think will also depend on where his home run trajectory goes, because Nolan Arenado is also one of the best all-around hitters in baseball. So if he goes somewhere where he knows hitting home runs is not the way to go, he's going to then tune his game more to going back to just being a gaps guy, a guy that can just hit it down whatever line, wherever you're shifting him against. He's going to go, oh, that's a joke, and then just hit it that way and make you look like an idiot. So, like, that's something that he's really good at doing, whatever. Basically, he's one of those players like Trout and Bellinger that we'll get to later, can do whatever the hell they want to do. They can just flick it that way. They can go the other way. But he's the best all-around hitter right with Trout, with that group of people, where I think his is going to depend where he goes. If he goes to, if the Phillies got him for some reason, like say the Phillies for some reason don't want to keep Alec Boehm and they're like, oh, let's get on Arenado, then he might hit 500 freaking home runs because he's going from Colorado to just destroying Harry the K's in Philadelphia. So, but
I could see that. I just don't see, and especially if it's the Phillies. If it's the Yankees, I see him hitting 600 because that just seems like it's the Philly way at this point.
Oh, yeah, but we have to remember, we have the guy that helped the Yankees get to those marks in Yankee Stadium. So, maybe that'll help.
Yeah, I with Arenado, I see him moving teams to somewhere, I don't think he's going to have a say. And, I mean, I don't know. I see him moving somewhere and sitting around, again, the 400 range. I think he's going to be good for a while. I just don't see him getting to 500 necessarily. I mean, the fact that he's already 29, not to say, I mean, how many guys have we already brought up that get better in their mid-30s at mashing baseballs? But
And Arenado also, of course, has been a guy that's always played, other than his first two seasons, in the high 150s or almost every game range. So he's a guy that's always available for you compared to some of the other people we talked about.
Right, and he always seems to be right around the MVP conversation. It feels like he's always right in the mix every single season.
Also a guy
how good he is on the field and in the batter's box.
Yeah. I mean, I think with how good of a year he had last year, he easily could have finished top 5. I know he finished 6th, but hitting 315 with 41 home runs and finishing 6th, I mean, that's tough. Yeah.
Next up is, we have to talk about him when we talk about home runs. It's Bryce Harper. Philly podcast, we have to talk about Bryce Harper. And I'm glad he was included in this graphic because he should be. And I actually tweeted this out on the day before we recorded this podcast right now. It's an abomination how few people in the comments think that he's going to get to that 500 mark. It's amazing how many people thought he had a terrible year when he hit 35 home runs and 130 something RBIs. It's absurd. So personally, I do think he gets there. He's at 219 home runs right now at age 27. To me, that's no question. I think he gets there, especially in Philly for the next 12 seasons if we have them. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he was on, I know when they do the, like I brought up on the podcast we did the other day, which will be a while ago from the time this comes out, but we had the simulated games Baseball Reference does. If we played a full season, I went to see what Harper's numbers would have been, and they had him on pace for at least 30 again, because we know he heats up in the second half the most. And he already had 15 homers. His batting average was putrid, which I hated them for. through the first half of the season, but he already had 15 homers. So if he takes off like he normally does in the second half, that's at least 30 to 35. Then again, if we were to play a full season from those simulated stats. So I think he's a guy, he would have hit way over 260 last year if he got going even like 3 weeks before he did. And that's the other thing people don't realize, because he was one of the best hitters in baseball again in the second half. And that's and what's so remarkable is people talk about how great his second half was in 18 to then get him to his contract year. Yes, he did have one of the best second halves in 18, but you want to know what he hit at the end of the season? 249. and nobody goes, oh yeah, that was terrible. I don't know why anyone's like some people did, but like when we signed him, not many people in Philly went, oh, that was terrible. I don't know why. Like nobody in Philly's concerned about that. It's all outside people, because you saw what he did in the second half and you see what he can do at crunch time. It's just about getting the coaching staff that can bring it more into a whole realm and not have it just be he's solid at homers and RBIs, but can't hit for average in the first half. And then all of a sudden he turns into like the second coming of like freaking like Joe DiMaggio in the second half. And you're so like, or Mantle or somebody like that. So you're like, that's why I feel he's a guy with Girardi. He might start taking off with this coaching staff. You got Girardi, you got Joe Dillon, you got names in our dugout now, just like the Flyers for hockey brought names into their coaching staff, and look how much that helped them. So bringing that experience and names in, I think, is going to help him immensely too, with even improving his hitting further.
Man, I know it's going to happen, but I really do hope that people start to give him the respect that he deserves. I know he is hated outside of Philadelphia, and I really hope that he gets one season, and I don't think it'll be this season, but maybe next year. It was supposed to be this year if we had 162 games, but I think in a 60-game season, he still has the potential to make people, shut up and stop calling him overrated. I think he has the potential to really turn some heads and change some opinions. At least I hope so.
He could
as a
win.
Phillies fan.
Yeah, well, he could also. You figure he gets good in the heat of the summer. When are we starting the season? The heat of the summer.
The heat of the summer.
So he could win the MVP.
I would hate it just because, it feels like there would be people that discredit it, saying it was only a 60-game season. It wouldn't count, but I would count it, just as much as anybody. I would say, everybody else played 60 games and he was still the best out of all of them. So, I mean, I hope, I want to see it happen. Again, people will discredit it if it were to happen, but I moving back to the topic of home runs, he's definitely, in my opinion, as long as we don't strike for a season or two coming up in the next few years as the CBA ends after the 2021 season, as long as we don't lose a season or two of Bryce Harper's contract years, I think we'll be fine. I think he definitely hits to that 500 mark.
I agree.
Next down on the list is a guy that murders baseballs year in and year out for the last 3 seasons. That's Cody Bellinger. He's only 24 years old as of right now, and he's already had 111 home runs. And this just feels like a no-doubter. It's a guy that doesn't get injured. It's a guy that, hits 30, 40 home runs a year. I mean, how many did he hit in his? It was his rookie season, right? When he hit almost over 40 home runs. 39.
Yeah, 39. He just missed 40, which was really salty.
Right, and I mean, he was. I see him hitting to 500 with ease. At only 24, already one of the best players in the league, already an MVP. Like, I see no doubt in my mind why he can't hit 500.
Yeah, well, I'll make a little bit of a bolder step prediction than 500 with how good of a sweet swing Bellinger has compared to like the Griffeys of the world, and like I said, DiMaggio, man, all the great lefties of all time. Like, he has that great sweet swing. He's a guy, if he doesn't get injured with the home run pace he's at, could easily hit 600, let alone 500. So that's a bold statement, but I would predict Cody Bellinger by the end of his career will have 600 and easily, if he has 500, 600, he's going to easily be in the damn Hall of Fame. But absolutely. If he has 600, he's going to, hands down, be in the Hall of Fame and go down as one of the best power hitters or potentially the best of our generation if he has somewhere over the 600, because you figure Bellinger came later than the Pujols generation, so he's part of this whole new generational wave, and he definitely has a chance to go down as the best power hitter in it.
I could see it. I could absolutely see that. I think I hate that he's on the Dodgers because I want to be able to root for him. I really do. But he's just got such a sweet. It's not even like a violent swing. Like you say, Bryce Harper's swing is like a violent swing. It's Bellinger's swing is just so smooth. It's fun to watch, and he's a fun ball player, especially with what he can do on the field with his glove. He's just all around one of the best in the game right now, and I can absolutely see him hitting 500.
Yeah, that's why I said Griffey, and like if you ever saw any of those there's obviously 500 million documentaries on the Yankees because they're the damn Yankees. Also, there's a thing called the damn Yankees. But when you look at DiMaggio, man, on those documentaries, they had those very subtle, great through the baseball swings. It wasn't like they were trying to kill somebody with their swing like Harper is. That's why I think Bellinger's a guy that you're never really going to see injuries from because in terms of it from the batter's box, where Bryce, you have to worry about that a little bit more because anybody that has a violent swing, you sometimes worry about their back or their shoulder or something on some swings.
Yeah, he's got that smooth swing like those guys, and I see no problem. Him and Bryce, I think, are going to be. I think by the end of their careers, I think Bellinger catches up to Bryce. I think they start to compete with each other. That would be an interesting, like 5 years down the line, they're in a race to get to 500, and the Phillies and the Dodgers are the two best teams in the NL. And I mean that's a dream away, but that would be an interesting storyline.
Yeah, well, that's a few years down the line. Then I would assume Belly's the quickest to get to that pace of all time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That he's already on. I mean, he's only 24 years old. He's already over 100. It just seems like a no doubter.
Yeah.
Two guys left on the list from the tweet. One of them is he feels like he burst into the scene this year, and that's Joey Gallo. And he kind of came out of nowhere. It feels like he turned into one of the most prolific power hitters in the game last season. He has 110 home runs right now at age 26. And it feels like he's a lot older. I feel like he's been around for such a long time, but it's just our perception as Phillies fans, not really paying attention to the Rangers the last couple seasons, I guess. What do you think of Joey Gallo?
I thought, well, first of all, I remember him being a guy. I don't know if you remember this, but that we had interest in before we drafted Boom, and we're thinking of trading for infielders. But he's a guy that I loved him when he came into the league because he didn't hit for average, but he kind of reminded me of like an Adam Dunn type when he first came in the league, where like he was going to hit you the 40-something homers and get you the RBIs and hit you those majestic homers where you're like, holy God, that might kill somebody if they're not paying attention. Like
a three true outcome guy, like a walk, home run, or strikeout guy.
Yeah, and also he's definitely gotten better. He still needs to improve it tenfold, but he's gotten better when it comes to eye at the plate, and we saw that last year. His on-base percentage went from 312 to 389, which is obviously a huge jump, and his slugging was the highest it ever was at 598. His bad thing from last year was he probably could have had his best home run season 45 up, but he got injured at this game 70. So that was a bummer for him, but if he can stay healthy and keep hitting for the 250 average and up, that means he's getting more contact rate bats to the ball. He's a guy, again, is only in his mid-20s. He's a guy that I think might have a chance to get there. He might end more at the high 400 range just because he's a guy with his swing. I could see having some inconsistencies in his career. Right. But other than that, I could see him getting up there. I could just see him being more high 400 range just because I don't know if he's a guy that fully has his swing honed in yet, and I could still see some inconsistencies. He's a guy with one of the nice lefty swings, but he's more of a violent he's a smoother lefty swing, but it's more of a violent, smooth swing compared to other people. And like, it's definitely not as violent as Harper's, but it's definitely not as calm as Bellinger's either. It's kind of somewhere in the middle of those two. But
right, and just to go off of that, he's a guy that I feel like pitchers are going to figure out in the next few years. It's like you said, he hasn't honed in his full swing, and I think he has the potential to be that guy, that like a Bellinger type swing where, if he relaxes it a little bit and kind of like figures out how to really control his power, he's a guy that could end up hitting almost 500. Like you said, I think he does end up around 400 too, as long as he stays consistent. But I mean, it's hard to tell right now. Like I said, it's still early on in his career. You don't know where he's going to go.
I agree. I mean, the other thing is, I don't think they're ever going to figure him out for homers. I think they might figure him out for his overall bat, because obviously when he hit in the low 200, that was when he was hitting the high homer rate still. And then last year he brought his average up. I think he has holes in his swing more from a batting average standpoint, not necessarily from a power standpoint.
Right. I completely agree. And another person the last person on this list, he also seems to have a pretty smooth swing, and I hate to bring this guy up because he's a rival to the Phillies and will be for a long time, and that's Ronald Acuna Jr. He currently sits at only 67, which makes me think why they included him on this list. I mean, it makes sense. He's a guy that almost was at 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases last year, which is a very exclusive group in Major League history. And I just don't see him keeping the power for as long. I mean, maybe he develops that power as he grows old, and he might have, 600 home runs. He's only 22 years old. He's already at 67. What do you think about him? Because I hate talking about him.
Well, first of all, he also took that fifth MVP spot from my man on Arenado, so now I have a little bit of a grudge to pull there with him. But he's a guy that started at a really good pace, too. I mean, he hit 26 in his first year, then bombarded it up to 41. That's a guy that is going to be on a ridiculous pace now, only entering his age 22 season. I hope to God he doesn't hit 500 home runs. But he's a guy with the swing he has and a chance to be one of the best guys to ever come out of Venezuela. There we go. Found it. He's somebody that has a chance to really be the staple of baseball from that country. And of course, baseball's had some people from that country to really just take the game and really help everybody from over there that's a great player to want to come over here because they look at how great he is. I think he's a guy that, unfortunately for us, has a chance to get to 500 by the end of his career, because I think the only thing that's going to stop a guy with the swing and the five tools of Acuna to do basically another player that can do whatever the hell he wants on the field on a given day, the only thing stopping him is if he gets injured.
I agree. It's such a shame that he ended up on the Braves because he is a fun player. It's infuriating that you have to watch that from the opposing fan side. But I do believe that on the path that he's on, like you said, unless there's an injury that stops him along the way, I think he easily gets to 500, which is so sad to say.
Yeah, who I'm surprised they didn't put on this list since they put Acuna, if they were going to put young guys, especially young guys from our division? Soto, since he's only 21.
Yeah, I think he'd be an interesting one. I think friggin' Pete Alonso would be an interesting one to put on here at that pace. I mean, one season, it's hard to say. I mean, it's a lot easier to say for Acuna because he's going to sustain this. There's no way around it. He's just so good. But
the same could be said for Soto, though, because he came up at 19, raked, and then raked at 20. So
for sure. For sure. He's on that path, too, and it freaking sucks, man. Being a Phillies fan never gets easier, it seems like.
Nah, we just need to get my guy Casey Morton up here in a few years. We'll be perfectly set with him, Scott Kingery, and everybody. Mick Abel will have some sick nickname by then, and then be dominating the MLB like 4 or 5 years down the line. So we'll be
definitely wishful thinking. Definitely wishful thinking. I envision it, and I hope it turns into that. But man, with the luck we've had, especially with prospects, it's terrifying. So that ends our archive podcast about some of the greatest home run hitters in the game today and whether or not we think that they will reach that 500 mark. Bork, do you have any final thoughts on this topic?
No, other than it was just really enjoyable. I love talking about home run hitters. It's like talking about top goal scorers in hockey and stuff. They're always the most fun people to talk about. And the only thing I had was obviously in Philadelphia, look for Harper this year to be a guy, like I said earlier, that just dominates coming straight in and actually starts the year well because, yeah, he doesn't normally get off to good starts, but that's normally also in cooler months. He normally rakes in hot months, and we're starting in the heat of the summer. I think he's a guy that might get off to a great start this year. And like I said, potentially win the MVP. And then my only other final thought, since we're talking about home runs, and he tend to have more home run power before he got a little bit out of shape last year, but that was also because of off the field issues. Segura is probably a guy you're going to see more at his, obviously he's a 60-game season, but at his normal home run pace compared to last year because he's jacked. So
I hope so. I'm not fond of Segura, and I do think that he's a little lazy when it comes to, you know, the fielding aspect and running the bases and all that, but I do think he's going to turn it around this season. He's going to bring me back to his side. I really hope he does because I want to like him. I want to keep him around. You know, he'll be a good second baseman for us or third baseman, wherever Girardi ends up playing him.
Fully agree.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to send it over to the Jackdaws to close this out. If you love our intro and outro music, be sure to follow and support their awesome Irish folk rock band at www.jackdaws.com. or go check out The Jackdaws on Facebook. This is the CTP Podcast, and Sean signing us out.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked up in a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.